and welcome to the Silent Evil Podcast. I'm Spencer Scott Holmes.
And I am Cameron.
And we're coming back to you again, this time with Parasite Eve II, the old sequel, probably at almost the total pinnacle height of both PlayStation 1 and even survival horror. Because first and foremost, I have to say, when playing this game is the graphics are so good on it. I mean, when just think about PS1, it's like, holy crap. You know what I mean? And this is about, I was having a hard time trying to think of a game that I thought that actually looked better than this one.
Yeah. There's even a ton of features and stuff in this that like Final Fantasy VIII was doing. We saw a little bit of it in Dino Crisis and whatnot, but static cam, but also had moving cameras and whatnot. The introduction scene of you walking up to the Acropolis Tower or whatever, and just the shadows, the lighting, just all the effects that they did during that whole scene or whatever was so cool for a PS1 game. I thought it was awesome. So
yeah, because it has a lot of that cool. It's used a lot in Final Fantasy VIII and IX as well too. Of course, because they're all Square games, but that thing where you have pre-rendered graphics, but then it also has movement involved with it as well too. So you have this mixed match stuff coming together. That actually kind of fixes that in a sense Dino Crisis 1 issue where they're oh, let's just do it all in game and so on like that. By this kind of way, kind of gives you the best of both worlds, where it's you can have some movement of the camera, but the graphics are going to look a lot more crisper and real looking.
Yeah. Yep. No, it's a really great blend, between pre-render backgrounds versus things that are actually in the environment and whatnot too. So I thought it was actually really well done that way. So
yeah, exactly. And this is one of those ones too that strangely, I started this one up, maybe in the mid 2000s when I finally sat down to play. I played through Parasite Eve 1 and loved the living daylights out of it. I'm I'm gonna go into Parasite Eve 2, and I was playing it on an emulator or something like that. And I remember only being able to get a couple hours in it, and just the game froze, and just no matter what I tried to do, I could not get past the part. And I realized early on, I thought it was a little bit far along. I'm oh no, it was really just the end of the very first level is about as far as I got.
Oh God.
When I did it. And it's I tried everything from switching memory cards around to trying different emulators and so on, and just couldn't get past that part. So I was one of these days I'll sit down again. Lo and behold, it took, another 15 plus more years to finally get there. But we'll say I'm so glad I finally did go through this, because I do look at this game as kind of one of the top tiers of not only that PlayStation era, but I do think of that kind of survival horror, even though I know these games are, they're almost, they're survival horror that lean in that RPG zone. So you get the kind of best of both. But granted, I know we'll be comparing it to Parasite Eve 1 and 2, because that's the interesting thing here is that, one is, I think one's one of the most perfect games ever made. I love everything about that one. I think that gameplay style is just ridiculously good, and nobody else seems to use that, and in my mind, I sometimes think of 2 being slightly, or a lot more different, closer to Resident Evil 2 or something like that. But in going through this again, I'm it's actually not as far away from Parasite Eve 1 as I would initially remembered. Of course, it's a little bit more action RPG, and a little bit less, not as much customization, not as much leveling up type stuff. They tone that down. It's almost in a weird way. It kind of reminds me of the same thing that Mass Effect did from Mass Effect 1 to 2. Though I will say, I feel like Mass Effect 1 to 2 is a little bit bigger shift. But the first one was this very its own game, a very unique, had the RPG elements in it, and then when 2 came out, they're make it more like Gears of War. Let's cut that RPG shit out of there. You know what I mean? They're going to reload. Why? I don't know. Just make them do it. That's what everybody else does.
Right. Yep.
And that was kind of how Parasite Eve 2 always kind of came across, where it felt like somebody came across no, make it more like Resident Evil 2.
Right. Yeah, no, I fully agree. Because in my opinion, because to set the tone here, I played Parasite Eve 2 decades ago, with it was a recommendation from my uncle or whatever, so we sat down, we played through Parasite Eve 2, not having any context of the original Parasite Eve, so I just thought it was a cool Resident Evil 2 clone essentially, because my uncle was super into Capcom back then too, but now replaying through this, and we'll get to this a little bit later, because spoiler alert, I did not finish it this run, but you know, like going into this experience, just finishing the original Parasite Eve, you know, on the podcast. I almost feel like there needs to be like, I don't know. Whereas the original Parasite Eve was like an 80-20 split of like RPG to survival horror, it's like this game like reversed that, in my opinion. And I almost feel like the first game like put a negative like taste in my mouth of the second playthrough, and exonerated on top of that too of like the struggle that I had this playthrough. I don't think it's nearly as good as the first game, and there's so many different reasons of why, you know, that we'll get into as we talk about this. But I still think it's a really good game. It's very experimental, but it's also very safe. I feel like, you know, like they did not want to try to push something that was, I don't know. I don't really know how to describe it. Like they didn't like really push the boundaries of like what survival horror was. This feels so generic, but also has Parasite Eve's, you know, qualities of, you know, having like abilities and like magic spells and like things like that, you know, which is cool. But I think in general, like my overall sense of PE2 has gone down since I played the first game. So
It's weird because I think mine went up. Because I remember like when I first played Parasite Eve 2, I was kind of almost bummed because it wasn't like Parasite Eve 1. And I was like, man, you know, it's cool, but it's just not. God, that first one was so good. And then when this one it was like after I got like a handful of hours into it, I kind of came around to it. I was like, you know, I still kind of like this quite a bit in this game here. I still think it's neat. As I said, I don't think it's, you know, like one, it's like one of those ones, there's only like two things, and it's more just from the time that could just help that game out. And is, you know, its load times are a little bit on the longer part for that first one. But that, once again, that's PS1. I'm not really blaming the game.
Sure.
And two, it's one of those ones where those random encounters could come a lot more, you know, faster and so on like that. But it's like the weirdest thing. It's like the thing that everybody complains about game, like most games where it's like, there's too much random encounters. That game's the exact opposite, where it's like, there needs to be more random encounters.
Yeah.
You know, that's why I always felt like if they did like a remaster of those or something like that, that would be the thing to have, is just a little bit of a speed up thing, kind of like Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9, but also make those random encounters actually appear more, you know?
Yep.
Just a little bit. Or like have them just be able to turn them on, turn them off, like that kind of notion. But yeah, it's like, you know, 2, I actually kind of came around thinking it was actually more similar to Parasite Eve 1 than I would have said like to Resident Evil 2, like I would initially would have thought, because it still has that somewhat, it's just, it goes to like an action RPG thing, but instead of having like your commands pop up and everything like that and being able to take a break while you like figure out what your strategy is going to be next, you got to do it live and so on. But then you still have your magic powers, you still have your items that you can go into to a menu. It's really just the attack and the movement that kind of makes it for the action part.
Yep. And I don't know. And again, you know, like the context of walking into this again is like directly after Parasite Eve 1. To go from that style game to this, you know, tank control, very much, you know, like when you're in combat, you have to like, you know, target and whatnot, you know, with the square button. I struggled, dude. Like I really, really struggled like in some combat scenarios, and in a lot of it, like, could be fixed with just the one core feature that RE3 brought to the table, and it's just a quick turn. Like if I think if PE2 had a quick turn, I would be so much more hyped about the combat, the way that the game flows in terms of its combat model and whatnot. Because like even in some exploration sections too, you know, it's just like I wish that there was a quick turn. Very much like I feel like I'm grinding my nose against walls constantly in this game, you know, which is a feature of this genre for sure, you know. But
again, it's one of those ones you take that for granted, because I thought the same thing too. I'm like, oh, the 180 turn would be so handy in this game, but then I thought about, I'm like, well, Resident Evil 3 was the game that kind of invented that, and this game, even though I think it technically came out after Resident Evil 3, of course it was made before probably, you know, Resident Evil 3, so they didn't have any idea about that quick turn or anything yet. They were still basing everything off Resident Evil 2 as their kind of basis, you know, sort of the same way that Parasite Eve 1's really the only thing it's based off of is like, you know, as far as survival horror, it's Resident Evil 1 and maybe Alone in the Dark, you know, but I really think that most people were just looking at Resident Evil 1 at that point, you know. So yeah, that's the one thing is that because you really have to do that thing in the game. And I actually I kind of sat there and like dicked with my controls for a while to get them perfect because I didn't like the initial way that they were. I didn't like square being my targeting button. I switched it to I think I made R1, even though you can't customize it, but there was like 3 or 4 choices you had, and I kind of found the one. I was like, okay, this feels closer. If it's gonna play like Resident Evil, I want it to kind of play like Resident Evil in a sense.
Yeah.
So I went with that, where I think R1 was my targeting one, which seemed to make it a little bit better. And then I think I had to press either X or square to shoot. But yeah, I kind of went back and forth on that a couple of times, and then finally was like, okay, cool. Put the auto run on, because that made a difference too. Because I just didn't like that. I was like, why is circle the run button? That's a strange location for that.
Right.
That's so far away from where I need to be at. It's just that weird thing where everybody thinks that like they're gonna reinvent the wheel. It's like no. Resident Evil had those controls very dialed in. Don't try to think that you're better than that.
Yeah, and it took me a minute to figure out that you could do that, because I'm playing on original hardware and whatnot, and like D-pad's gonna make you walk, whereas if you're in analog control, like that's your sprint, more or less. You can hold a button, you can hold circle with the D-pad, combined to sprint or whatever. But as soon as I figured out like, oh, there's an always sprint, option in here, like hell yeah, and that took me like halfway through the game to figure that out, but even then, like leading up to that, like holding circle like wasn't a big deal, just to sprint around. But
yeah, it was just one of those ones
in
like
combat, in combat you do auto run,
Oh, I guess that's true. Yeah, as I said, I did that thing. What happens to be a lot in video games where I'll sit there for like really like something's probably a way longer time than most people would, where I'll go back and forth to the menu like 3, 4, 5 times until I kind of just get it dialed in. I've always been used to, ever since I was like a young kid, that you always go to the options menu before you go to anything else anyways. Sega and Super Nintendo always kind of like taught me to do that. And then it's just like, I was just trying to get those controls. And once I kind of figured them out, I was like, okay, not too bad. But this is one of those games too where you do kind of have to do that thing where you have to position yourself perfectly, because you can kind of run around and dodge stuff, but you're better off just getting Aya in a better position and almost like weaving your way through that kind of style. Because dodging, there's times it can work, but there's other times, like perfect example, it's a little bit farther along, but there's those stupid horse monsters, and you'll be in some of those narrow alleyways, and it's just like, I learned this, like, don't try to dodge. You're just going to end up losing way more health that way. Just stand there and keep firing. You're going to get knocked over, but then go again.
Yep. No, exactly. And like I think like level design wise, the game falls pretty hard on its face, like once you get to Dry Town, in my opinion, and then even more so in the lab setting a little bit later. But the Acropolis Tower, like I think that like as an intro area for exploration combat, like it's teaching you the core mechanics of the game. Like as you're exploring through this area, you're starting to learn about like keys and like oh, grab this key to open this door so I can grab the next key. It's just very typical survival horror. And again, like I don't think this game is doing anything that's like fantastic, like like oh, I've never seen this before, but it's well done, like. And I think that throughout the totality of the Acropolis Tower, which should be about your first 2 hours ish of the game, like I think is very, very, very well done. But then it starts to the seams start to break, by the time that we get to Dry Town. And a big problem that this game has is that it has off-screen enemies constantly in combat, and unless you're holding that GPS unit, which holds up one of your slots in your armor, like good luck like targeting anything, because you can't tell. I mean, like you can kind of tell because I will like lock on to something, but you don't know if you have direct line of sight. You don't know if like, oh, if I pull the trigger now, am I just gonna hit the wall in front of me, or am I at a right enough angle to where I can hit this enemy, and then from there, it's like, how far is that distance shot? How much damage am I actually gonna do? Am I gonna get the crit? Am I gonna, like, and there's like all these like RPG things that start running through your head, So again, like the marriage of survival horror and this is like really cool, but I think that especially with like camera and off-screen enemies, that was another huge frustration for me, leading throughout this whole experience.
There's definitely a lot of wall shots. There's definitely, it's weird that you mentioned the GPS thing. I had that GPS thing equipped for so long, and then I realized that the armor I had on the whole time had an auto GPS thing in there.
Oh God. Of course.
I mean, I probably had the GPS thing on all the way to the laboratory, and then that's when I finally figured it out. It said it in there, and like I was trying to like decipher if I wanted new armor. It was all, oh, it says it has a GPS built in. Well, extra spot.
Burnt the slot.
come in handy. You know, granted, for the beginning of the game, that stuff's not nearly as important. The only thing that I learned it has this weird, we were talking about this before, but there's a mechanic where on your armor you can hold items too, which kind of threw me off first. Like I was like, okay, cool, I got 20 items, and then it's like, oh, then I get like a bonus 7 items or whatever I can hold my armor. No, that doesn't take away from your 20. That's just how much you can hold with you. But the stuff that you hold on you is when you're in combat. That's the stuff you need. So if you need a potion, you can pull it out that way. But also you have to have your ammo in there too, because that was the thing I learned too. Is if you fire your clip, cool, and then you're like,
no ammo.
She's got nothing to reload. Good thing I had that baton always on me too, which I will say that baton is actually much better than you would expect. You know, it's not like the knife in Resident Evil 2 where it's like, you know, it takes 26 stabs to kill a zombie. Like that baton, you can go to town on things. There's some enemies where it's like it was almost better to use the baton on it. Just like you just start clubbing them, you're like, bam, bam, bam.
Yeah. No, it does good damage, man. Like, and that's something that I definitely appreciate. It's like I think that, you know, throughout my experience in this run, I 100%, I think you could totally beat the game with probably that baton outside of maybe the last like couple fights or whatever. Yeah, the amount of damage that thing does right off the get-go, it's actually a very viable weapon to have. So
no, and that's good because I always think that like whenever they give you like that kind of, you know, the item, whether it be like a knife or anything like that, I always think those items should be good. But the thing that kind of makes you not really want to use them as often is because the fact you have to get up close and personal. So you've got that kind of risk, you know.
Well, I kind of think of it like conscript, for example. You know, whereas you ran around that game with like the shovel and like, you know, the whatever, you know, the various breakable weapons or whatever, and I ran around with that knife that entire game, the unbreakable knife. Again, you know, risk reward, you know, style type stuff. You know, I think pretty early on in this experience, like especially once you get, you know, like you start off with a pistol, you know, like you get a shotgun, you get an M4, you get, you know, like all these like various weapons and whatnot. But really, like once you get past your starter gear, I really don't think there's any real need to have at least like any kind of like melee type stuff. Like you have to be pretty down bad to like get to the point, which I did, you know, like 'cause I speedran the game, but you know, but it took me 6 hours to get to that point, you know.
Yeah. Well, I carried that baton, like, once again, I think I carried it all the way to the lab in my item thing, thinking that, like, just in case, you know, and mostly it's not that I would run out of ammo, it's that I would accidentally have the ammo not equipped in my armor. That was always my bigger fear, is that would happen, you know, because you generally don't run out of ammo, because they actually have kind of a cool feature in the game that Aya can always run back to either her car or, you know, in certain places there'll just be like an ammo box here and you can pick up the ammo, so at least you always have that kind of safety net. I guess technically on the first one you had something like that too, because you could always run back to the police station and they would always give you ammo and a health, like one health thing, so worst case scenario you could always run back and do that. So I always think that's kind of cool. So it does keep you at least from, you know, worrying too much. But if you're not paying enough attention, though, you blow through those 500 rounds. Next thing you know, you're like, exactly. Oh, crap, I don't have anything else equipped. And there's nothing I can do but run out of here now.
Yep. Yeah, and like I again, like as soon as I got the M4, I just dumped all my BP into just buying 800 rounds of M4, and then from there, like the amount of M4 rounds that you can get, you know, just as pickups or, you know, as you're buying them as you're going, like it was so manageable that even by the end of the game, which again we'll get to, by the end of the game, like I still have 800 rounds of M4 ammo, but good luck using it on those final two bosses. You know, like it's just, you know, it doesn't do enough damage, you know, so.
Yeah, no. Well, this game actually kind of reminds me a lot like Dino Crisis 2. It has a lot of the similar kind of mechanics where it's almost a little bit more actiony and fun, and you could always buy ammo. Worst case scenario, just by going out and doing enough like kills and so on, you'll have like, you know, places you can go to buy things. You get armor, you get all that kind of stuff. One thing I will say is this is something I thought was actually pretty dialed in for this game, especially for the time period, is actually the map system is actually really good in it. Yep. Like not only you got the map, but it even has a thing you can press triangle and Aya will kind of give you like a hint of what you're supposed to do next, which I think is kind of cool because especially say if you put the game down for like a week, you could come back and be like, oh geez, where did I leave off at? Oh yeah. You know, so it generally they're not like the most super helpful hints, but they at least give you an idea of what you should be looking for. You know,
I very much appreciated that because upon us deciding that okay, we're gonna play through PE2, like I started that day, which I think was the day that we recorded our last episode, and I got a bit ahead of you. Like I got through Acropolis and whatnot, and I was like, okay, like I want to try to match pace with you or whatever. So I took a brief break, you know, and you had taken off down to LA for that weekend or whatever, you know, and then you finally got started when you got back that Sunday, and then I fell behind, and then that
I just like I'm like I gotta catch up the camera.
You know? and then that was kind of like my trigger point to be like, all right, like I still want to get this game done in two weeks, you know, to like kind of maintain pace or whatever. Let's just speed on through this because I know the game well enough, you know, based off my youth and whatnot. But the one thing that I will say that really brought me by surprise, and again, like I was questioning myself towards the end of this of just like, how did my 10, 11, 12-year-old self like do this back then or whatever? Because like there's some really convoluted like puzzles in this game too, I feel.
No, I think this game actually. Yeah, there's a couple. There's probably like 3 of them that I think are like one of those ones that it sounds weird. They're almost so kind of like a pain in the ass that I almost went like. Granted, 2 of them you could look up, so that would skip it. But there's one that makes me like. That was the only reason I kind of was like questioning playing this game a second time in a row.
Yeah,
because I didn't want to go do that sliding, tile puzzle thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know that you see them in other survival horror, like Resident Evil 4's got one and so on like that. You see them here and there, but like that one was like a lot more complicated than other ones, and you have to do it 3 times.
Yeah.
And it took me like, 30, almost 40 minutes, it felt like, to do it. Like, so that was the one part that when I think about playing this game over, I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that again.
Oh yeah. I mean, like it was for me, it was a sense of frustration when I got to that part too, because like I'm sitting there for like 20 minutes just sliding blocks around, and like, and again, we'll get to it, but in that, I finally like I was starting to get cross-eyed just staring at it for so long that I finally just like called my wife over and I was just like, Kim, can you like, she's nuts into puzzles and whatnot, and like within 30 seconds she figures it out. She's like, oh, just move this and this and this, and and then you can line it up that way and hit the button and go. But but again, like that sense of frustration of just like looking at this puzzle and just being like, all right, I've got 15 out of 16 blocks, there's one open slot, I need to move the one piece over here, like how do I get to that point? It's just, and that one in particular, like that one bugged the shit out of me. Like I did not.
Well, yeah, and the worst part too is you can't reset that puzzle. Like in other games, you just back out of it and like, cool, I've kind of jacked myself up. That game's like, yeah, right, you're gonna figure it out. Yep. There is no going back.
Well, especially because it gives you like 3, like the 3 different lines. Like you have the red line, the blue line, the yellow line, or whatever, and not realizing that each did something different, until I did the first one. I did the blue line, the horizontal line or whatever, and then it like opens up a chest in the room and it's like, oh cool, go grab the thing, whatever it was. Second one, like go up and then it spawns like a brand new enemy that I've never seen before. I'm 2 hours into my fucking save at this point. I can't kill it. It fucking kills me and then it throws me back 2 hours. So a lot of my complaints about this game probably doesn't have much to do with the game itself per se, but definitely like, the amount of resets and restarts I have on this, my profile right now says I have 6.5 hours in the game. I guarantee I'm probably 23 hours, like somewhere in that range at this point,
Well, I think that game too is also one of those weird ones where the time that it says in game is not necessarily just including like resets and so on like that. I feel like it must be one of those games where like there's a lot of moments where it doesn't count the time. And the only reason I say that because it felt like, because I looked at the time, I was thinking like, man, this game's gonna be kind of short. Is it gonna be like Dino Crisis 2 length or something like that? But then it's like, it felt way long. I'm like, I know it's telling me like 5 hours. I'm like, I know I've put like almost like twice that amount in there. Of course, there's resets and so on.
It must be just clocking gameplay, I'm thinking, because the 6.5 hours to me like makes sense in terms of gameplay, but like I know that just cutscenes alone in this game, because that's another piece that we kind of missed towards the start of this. It's obvious that Square dumped a shitload of money into its CGI this game because it's great. It's so good. But yeah, I don't know. I'm curious to kind of do a bit more research into that side of it too. So
yeah, because by the time I full on beat the game, I think I put about 9 hours as far as what that clocks. I think it was just shy of 9, like 850 or something like that.
Actually, it makes me curious. What's the average play time of this game?
Yeah, because that was about what mine was. But I know for a fact that, with, I probably put about, probably 12, 13 hours, it seemed like,
Yeah, that's about right. 12,
you,
15.
you
Completion
know.
is about 20. So
Well, and then, I know that you were having like a tough time with stuff. Now, I want to say this is one thing I was questioning. How long did it take you to realize that on the map there, when you're looking at it, that, when you complete certain tasks and so on like that, that the enemies respawn and you see that red mark? Because that was one thing I noticed. First, I was like, and I didn't catch on to that till literally Dry Town. I was like, I remember I opened the map. I'm like, well, why is all these rooms red
yeah,
and so on like
yeah,
that? And I'm like, well, I'm just going to go investigate. And then I kind of realized, I'm like, oh,
yeah,
that respawns the enemies.
yeah.
And once I figured that out, every single time I completed any sort of task, I would look at the map and go, oh, there's some red hot spots again. And I would go hit every single one of them. Bing,
Yep.
bing, 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 bing. And because I did that and just kind of went on like the overkill of like, killing and maiming these enemies and collecting all the points, it's like that kind of made me feel like I was almost like overpowered throughout it. But like not in a bad way, but like I always felt like I had more money than I knew what to do with,
Yeah.
I was, my guns were practically always maxed out and so on. So it's like that kind of system there. Once I figured that out, that did add a lot to help me out. Which I could see if you didn't notice that would be what would make this game really tough.
Yeah, I mean, I think I noticed that probably about the same about through Dry Town, and it seems to be like, like you'll clear the whole map and then you go through like some event, something happens, cutscene triggers, whatever, and like some event happens, and then it's like the map like essentially resets at that point. I think where this game, like credit that I'll give to it, that put me into the situation that I got into by the end of the game is that it doesn't require you to grind the way that like a traditional RPG would. You totally can, and like you said, like by doing that, like you felt overpowered. I felt like I was really in balance with the game majority of my run up until the final piece, and then the difficulty wall just like spikes so goddamn high that it's like, can I get through it? Yes. If you gave me another week, sure, I totally could. I don't want to though. Like I would almost rather restart at this point, knowing what I know now, and like slow roll through it, do all your combat, gain all your BP, get your experience, level everything, do it that way as compared to, because the majority of the fights, like especially through the latter half of Dry Town into the early portions of the labs and whatnot, I'm just running through fights. I'm just getting to the door, losing BP. Like you lose 10 BP every time you do that. But I never have felt a need up until, again, like the very, very end, where it's just like, oh, I don't have enough to do this fight. I can't get through this. So.
Well, I kid you not, about towards the laboratory part, like it was at that point where it's like, oh, it's another wave of things. Well, I feel like I should go and do it, though I don't feel like I need any points anymore. Like I was at that point where it's like, I didn't have all my magic leveled up. I had all the things that I needed leveled up, like, so I was like, I felt like I was just getting extra BP just to get it. So I would keep doing it, which I will say, if you did like a replay, the one thing that would be kind of nice is hopefully the fact that you wouldn't have to worry about having to go and always clear those rooms out over and over.
Yeah.
Because I will say that might be the one thing that it's cool, because it's an RPG that you can go out and do that stuff, and it gives you, more battles and so on to collect more points, yada, yada, yada. The downfall is, though, is I felt like because of that, it did make this game sort of have a little bit of a drag, that I kind of wonder if I wasn't so concerned about collecting all the money and all that stuff from those enemies every single time and clearing those rooms, that the game would almost like have a little bit more smoother play. Because it does feel like, there's only realistically 3 main areas. There's the tower at the very beginning, and that one goes by pretty quick and to the point and everything like that. And then there's Dry Town, and then there's the laboratory pretty much. And the laboratory has a couple multiple areas in it that makes it feel a little bit bigger, but it's all takes place in that laboratory, And they stay at those areas for a long time. Like literally Dry Town's disc 1, the laboratory's disc 2. And this is one of those games, when you get the disc 2, it's not like, okay, cool, here's probably the last quarter of the game. It's like, no, that disc 2 is literally like half the
Just
game.
as long. Yep.
It's one of those, it's probably the most balanced 2-disc game I've ever seen in my entire life. But that's the thing, is because I'll say about the RPG element in it, is you get pretty much 3 things when you battle an enemy. You get BP, which are your battle points that you can go and you can buy your guns, you can buy your armor and your ammo. and then you get experience points, but the experience points only go to unlock your new magic abilities, you know, your parasite ability, what the heck they call them, the mitochondria.
Yeah, it's
Is it parasite skills or something like what the heck?
yeah, something like that. It's
Yeah.
like it's just labeled PE, you know, more or less.
Yeah, PE. So you get that, and so you can level those up. But the thing is, it's like I wish the one thing that's missing in this game. I wish there was still a regular level up system, like on top of all that. You know, I guess in the third thing you get is you always get a little bit of MP each battle too that adds back up. That's how you get that. But I think that was the only thing because it sounds weird, but by not having an actual level up system in it, it makes the battles like, especially the second that you feel like you don't need that experience anymore and you don't need the BP very much. You kind of. You know, you go, I'm not really getting anything out of it, you know, and now I just feel like I'm just there to kill, you know, and just let's carry on. These things are just in my way now.
No, I very much agree because they should have, if they would have maintained the original game, and again, like I'm going to do a ton of comparisons to the original, but having a character like Aya having a character level could have played more into the parasite abilities, you know, but again, like you said, like the game is way more tailored towards like it wants you to be in combat. It wants you to, you know, like do the encounters, do the fights and whatnot, get the experience and the BP, upgrade your things with the BP, and then, you know, like level up your PE abilities, you know, with your experience and whatnot. But if they would have done like a tiered release type thing, so like the way that you described to me, like, so you have in the one tree, essentially you have like your, you know, your defensive abilities and your offensive abilities. Once you upgrade that to level 3 each, then you gain that third ability, which by the way, I never was able to get to.
Yeah, I felt that was another thing that probably was because those, especially that 1/3 ability after you get the defense and the offense boost, where you get the little balls that spin around you, like that thing came in really handy for a handful of enemies. Especially if you felt like you got to a battle, you're like, screw it, throw that thing on, and just you ran through, and then it just killed everything like as you went along.
Yep. Yeah. So I didn't get to experience a ton of that. But if they would have had if Aya would have had a character level, they probably could have had that a lot more, not even like streamlined, but just like slow leaked out to the character, you know, as you're progressing further and further, which may have helped in my situation, where I did hit that huge, crazy, like difficulty wall in front of me or whatever. If Eve would have been leveling this whole time of like, you know, level 5 to 10, you know, like you get these certain abilities between 15, you know, 10 to 15, blah, 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 and it tiers up and up and up, just like the first game does. I might have had more of an opportunity to actually have that ability for those final fights. It may have boosted me through it as compared to shit. Now I got to sit down and grind to go get these fucking things, you know, so. I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is, but yeah, that is a core difference between the first two games for sure.
Yeah. Well, and the weird thing is because this game kind of, you know, it's weird because it's straddling two lines where it holds on to just a little bit of that magic and leveling up and experience, but realistically, the game is actually trying to play like a real, like, you know, almost like shooter type game where you don't you can't level your guns up, like that kind of thing where it's like, how do you put more points in to make more firepower out of the gun, you know, like that kind of like, you know, thing that people question. So instead it's like, no, you're just really putting real parts together and so on like that, and none of that, you never get more attack, you never get more defense, you never get that, you know. Well, if you do, they come technically through weird items that they don't explain one bit either. Like this game literally wants you to have a strategy guide, because I don't know how you would figure out some of those items that you get.
Yeah, I mean, even upon so that's a really good point. You know, like talking about items in general. When you first pick up an item, have no idea what it is, it just has a question mark around it. You know, and like it gives you just like a basic description. It's just like a bottle, you know, or whatever, until you drink it, and then it gives you like, and then it gives you some kind of something, you know, and then it's like, oh, that's what that does. Oh, it gives me +5 MP or +5, you know, HP or whatever. So.
Well, there was a couple ones like the small metal box. What the hell did that do?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
Yeah, there was that one, and then there was empty bottles, and I never could figure out what to do. I even tried looking up online, and I couldn't figure out what they did. Like it was like, but there was a lot of items, and I learned way later in the game that you could press triangle on the item, I believe, and it gave you a better description of it. So there was like that was like an examine one. Gotcha. But there's a lot of items that like I literally had to look them up online because I'd get them and I'd be like, well, it doesn't really tell me what the heck's going on here. Right. And some of them they'd be like, okay, if you use this item, they're all the special items that you get throughout the game. But it would be like you get an extra magic ability on whatever, earth, wind, fire, whatever the heck one it was. And most of the time that was like not worth it. That sounds nice on paper, but that wasn't what you really wanted to do. You wanted to put it in like your holding, and then it would either give you like, yeah, now you take 25% less damage, or now you do 50% more damage, and things like that. So they had that weird, like that item level up system, I guess you would say. I would have traded that really instantly just to have a regular level up system. I don't know. It's like one of those ones. I hate to sort of say it, but the RPG system was practically mastered in the 80s. I don't know why people think that they can always sort of like improve it or put like a spin on it. Yeah. Like I just feel just the old fashioned, give me stat points, let me put them wherever I want, let me, I always think that's just kind of like the simplest and easiest way to go about it. Everybody's happy,
Yep.
But just the fact that they have these items and it doesn't even say it in the description. It just says it might do something nice if you equip it. But then it's like you can't even really tell. I mean, you might be like, maybe I'm taking less damage.
Well, and that's the thing too, because like you can use items in or outside of combat, regardless. So if you take a bit of damage or whatever in an encounter, you get through that encounter, you finish it, then outside of combat you can totally heal or whatever. But a lot of the things like with these items that have the question marks around them, you have no idea what it's about to do or what it can do, and it's like. There was a couple of times where I was hanging on to an item just because exactly that. I had no idea what it was going to do, only to use it way later on as just a desperation item or something. It's just like, well, I think this is going to heal me. And then realizing like, oh, fuck, it gave me plus 10 to my HP permanently. And it's like, I could have used that 2 hours ago. Like, damn it, So, yeah, it's very, very experimental, but I think that it's also something to be said about PE2 is that it has a billion items in this game. There are so many various types, and that even boils down to like weapons and like the ammo that goes along with those weapons too. There's just so much variety in this game, your armor sets and things like that. And it's very similar to the first game in that regard. But I think it's very well done here. That is one piece that I really enjoyed, but it also throws a side effect at me where it's like, well, do I invest into this armor now, or do I just hang on to this BP and maybe buy some more grenades, now, or, and it's like, it's that type of game, which is fun, and that's a good feature. So,
yeah, well, I do think the guns are great in it. I do think the choices of ammo and everything like that's kind of interesting. Sometimes the only downfall is the fact that because you can only hold on to so many things, it kind of makes you a little bit more picky and choosy by what you take instead of just fully loading, like if it was Dino Crisis 2.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
One thing that's kind of weird though too, speaking of items, is you get item boxes throughout the game, but the item boxes literally don't connect until the very end of the game. Yep. It's like literally one of your like, well, now Aya, we haven't even got to the story, but Aya is now working for the FBI. So instead of this being like a die-hard lethal weapon type story, now it's more like an X-Files type. She investigates like, monsters and paranormal type stuff and whatnot. She's part of MIST and goes out there and, takes care of bioweapons that have appeared. But yeah, those item boxes, that's like, I remember for the longest time, I'm like, oh, well, what the heck? I guess that stuff's all totally gone. I literally wrote some of that stuff off. I'm like, I guess I'm never seeing that again.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And at the very end of the game, it's like, your one partner guy that you like never see. You see him in the beginning and then you never see him to the very end. He's like, here's all your boxes. And you're like, cool. That would have come in handy a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
Not like,
I lost some items in between acts, because of that, because you can't transfer stuff.
Yeah.
Unless you throw it on yourself, I guess, but
yeah. Well, they do have everything. As long as it was in one of those 3 boxes or whatever throughout the game, they do finally appear at the very end.
Yeah. I noticed that.
When you go to that military compound section and they're like, here's all your stuff and here's the dude selling you all kinds of weapons and there's a bunch of stuff there. Weird things though too I noticed is that there was armor that came along where like I'd always have to make sure I save beforehand because you don't know what you're getting until you buy it.
Right.
So I'd always save before I went to go buy stuff. And a lot of the armor, it's like it was like the second piece of armor that I had was like better than everything else throughout the game until I got to the very end of the game. It was like I couldn't figure that one out. Like I kept coming across new armor at the shops, and it was always crappier. And it was like, what?
Yep. No, I noticed that too, and I think it's probably the exact same armor you're talking about. The second armor you get in the game, like that's what I use the entirety of the game. So.
Yeah, literally the only I changed when I got to that very end part where I talked about where the three boxes show back up again, is the military guy that's standing there selling you stuff. I bought that one, which was kind of like the equivalent of the one I had at the beginning, but with like an extra 20 health and an extra 20 MP, and
Yeah.
it was expensive as all can be. That was for a while, 'cause for a while there, I was like, I have so much BP, like. What am I gonna do with this? And then it was like, oh, there we go. I could buy this.
Yeah, there you go.
Most people probably couldn't buy if you didn't go and you didn't kill everything.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's how I was going through it. Like even just to have, like, because some of that earlier on armor, is somewhere around the range of like 4, 5, 6,000 BP or whatever, which is quite a bit at that level, at that time of the game or whatever. But it not entirely impossible to go get. You just go do all the encounters, So I just didn't feel that. And again, I think it plays into the strengths of this game where it really doesn't require you to be a try hard for majority of its experience, which is really good. I genuinely think that you could more or less run the way that I did, just have a bit more preparation leading through Dry Town into these, into the lab section or whatever to be able to get through these final fights. If I would have remembered that there was a back-to-back battle at the very end, like I probably would have been preparing about 3 or 4 hours, ago in my save, to be able to get to that point. So
yeah, well, even kind of going in, like I will say, when you initially get to Dry Town, I actually think that is kind of a cool location, though. Just the way, especially when it's there in the daytime, and you just got this interesting, very Americana thing, but it's made by Japanese people. So I always love the way that kind of looks. I mean, they even have a Coca-Cola, like literally licensed stuff in there, and it's just, hey, there's this gas station, there's a little roadside motel, there's a coffee shop, and a couple other buildings and so on. I think that's a really neat location, actually, for survival horror. And the fact that it starts off as day, and then it kind of gets more darker and creepier as it goes into the nighttime and so on. I think that section is actually probably my favorite part. But I will say it does drag. But a lot of times I'm like, does it drag because of just so many encounters after a while? Or is it... Because I don't think it's actually really that long. If the encounters were just kind of like the bare minimum, I think you would just kind of go through it and you would feel smooth and paced. I think it's just the fact of like when you have to go up, let's go clear out everybody again. Well, Aya's gonna make Dry Town safe once more.
Right. Well, I think it's something to be said too, because all these locations, none of them are huge. I would say, like a lot of them are like every area that we go to is actually pretty small. I think it's the amount of backtracking that we have to do in these sections that make it drag, and because I felt like probably majority of my time spent in this game was probably in Dry Town. I think its first half of Dry Town is really good. Leading up to the sections where we start going underground, I think that's where the game really starts to kind of unravel at its seams and whatnot. But up until that point, I'm very much with you. I really enjoy like the first few areas of this section of like Aya trying to figure out like, trying to find people and, like items and things like that, trying to more or less just trying to figure out what's going on in Dry Town, just because, story wise, we get some kind of like indication that there's some sand, or whatever, and like make these comparisons. Like, oh, we got to make it out to the Mojave Desert. We're going to Dry Town, blah, blah, blah. So story wise in this game, I really just, it went over my head majority of the time, it's cool to see the return of Aya. It's cool that she's like, has flourished from her role back in NYPD, investigator FBI type thing, like in New York, to now being in, LA, and is just like more or less like the world's hunter of, these beings, these, NMCs and whatnot. So
yeah, no, I do think that part's kind of cool. I like that. One thing I think is actually another neat feature in this game, is the fact that how Aya can literally talk to items and like talk multiple times. So you'll get like you'll talk to it once and she'll say one thing. You could talk to it again, she'll give more details, maybe a third or fourth time. And some of them too would be like she'll talk to it once and then be like, oh, wait a second, there's something over here. Let me see it again. And then you find items. I think it's kind of cool about how much dialogue and like details into all that stuff is pretty darn cool. And just the fact that you can go into like all these rooms and all this stuff, and you can really like look through a lot of stuff and get like a lot of clues out. Like they put a lot into that.
Yep. No, I did. Yeah, 100% agree. Yeah, it's very good in that regard. So.
And then also in Dry Town, you meet this pretty much the other, I guess you would say, somewhat main character. You don't play as him, but is Kyle Madigan. For the longest time, you're like, who the hell is this guy? Like, he's like always like disappearing whenever some conflict comes up. He's never helpful. He's drinking in the bar. Like, he just seems like an ass. And you're like, you want me to like this guy? I'm like, I don't trust this guy one bit this whole time. You know, yeah, he's never anywhere to be found whenever like the monsters start to come back.
Yeah, exactly. And just to talk about, like, because this is where we really start to see a lot of cool monster designs, and I'll round it back around to the first game, and just like the zoo section of the first game, like how many random monsters there are throughout that section into later sections and whatnot. Here it's like everything makes sense where it's supposed to be. Like you refer to them as horses. I kind of look at them more like kind of like goats or whatever, like these
that
like
makes
really
sense,
weird monster looking things, that just charge you nonstop. But
yeah, they're on all fours because they are smaller than a horse. I call it a horse, but like they are like definitely more goat like size.
It's like almost like a llama. That's more what I was.
That
like
sounds about
llama,
right
because of the long neck and all that.
The face.
Like, yeah, exactly.
I can't help. There's like that one just like CG cutscene they have where the thing's face turns and looks at the camera. I just bust up laughing. It's just so like goofy looking. But those enemies there's a handful of enemies that are like super pain in the ass ones, but those ones like man, I just learned it's just best I don't try to dodge them unless I'm in those like open areas, like in like the main part of the motel or something like that. If not, you just get clobbered by them and so on.
Well, and that's where, again, like I think that part of the game starts to fall apart for me in this area is because of how tight and narrow and, again, fixed camera angles where shit's just off screen, and especially with these enemies, because you have zero indication. There's no sound cue. There's no nothing to tell you that this thing's about to charge. Other than it physically being in frame, you see it lower its head, it kind of scrapes the ground twice, and then it runs towards you. But again, there's like really no other indicator of it. And again, with how tight and narrow these sections are or whatever, it was just highly frustrating. I felt like I got hit way too many times. And again, like, is it a skill issue for me? Is it actual design problems or whatever? I think it's probably a mixture of both, But,
because there's some parts where, like, when you're in an open area, you're like, I feel like I could dodge these things finally. I feel kind of good about myself. And then a lot of times it's just that classic, old fashioned. It's just better to bully your way through it. Like, because sometimes when you try to be more like, I'm going to try to dodge, I'm going to try to do this, you just end up not getting very many hits in, and then you start losing more health than you know, it's almost worth, where it's just like, just keep firing.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, keep reloading that grenade launcher and keep firing, no matter what. But it's just like there is a lot of still cool enemies and varieties throughout this whole game. They give you way more than like Resident Evil has for sure, and so on like that. I mean, you probably have like 35 plus different types of enemies you see throughout this game. With their own different abilities and so on.
And there's just like a million more polygons in this game comparatively to the first game too. So just graphically, likewise, like each monster design is so cool looking, like even comparatively to the first game. Environment designs, like everything is just so much more sharp and clean in this game and whatnot. And I really, really enjoyed its art style. I think it's really good.
Well, it's like
environmental storytelling too.
The first one I always feels kind of like running in like a proto Final Fantasy VII engine, where this one's running in a Final Fantasy VIII one. And maybe even Final Fantasy IX kind of in between there to try some experiments and so on. And I think this is going back to that combat style, how I will say, because when you think about the first one is kind of an over-the-top camera angle for the most part. Maybe like isometric in a weird way for like most of the time. You're always kind of looking kind of down at an angle on Aya, so you kind of have a lot easier seeing your whole scene and battles and so on like this. Where this one, because it's using more Resident Evil fixed cameras, the camera can be in different locations, which makes for very interesting looks and makes for the the game and the story and all that stuff. But it does set you up for some areas where it's just like,
So this is crossing my mind very consistently, especially now that we're doing this podcast, we're doing survival horror. So in games that have fixed camera angles, tank control should be supreme in majority of cases. I think that this game probably would have benefited more from an omnidirectional type control scheme. Again, just for like just basic movement, even if they just segregated that to strictly combat. If they got rid of tank controls in combat. I think that like I would have had exponentially more fun with this game, and you could have added a lot more mechanics of the enemies instead of just being the very much like just coming straight at you style enemies and whatnot. um I wish that they would have done an omnidirectional control, but at the same time, because games like Post Trauma, you know, like had those issues where you move screen to screen and your shit's, you know, like going all over the place. I don't know what's best, but tank controls doesn't feel good in this game to me.
Yeah, strange enough, I was still totally fine with the tank controls for the most part. Like as I said, they're not as smooth as Resident Evil's, but nobody's ever. That's the thing is, I always feel every other survival horror game, even all the ones I like, they're never as smooth as Resident Evil. Resident Evil always plays like as fluid as possible.
Yeah,
you know.
I do have one suggestion that might have fixed it for me. So because there's a lock-on mechanic, because you physically hit a button, a target shows up on an enemy or whatever. If they would have made it to where you are 3D movable in that sense, to where you can strafe, essentially, you can sidestep, that may have fixed a lot of issues that I had, because you have to physically turn, but you're still aiming, you know, like because you're locked onto that character or whatever. Aya wants to turn and point her gun at it, but at the same time, you don't want to lose that lock on, because as soon as you turn and you start to move a direction or whatever, you're jamming on square trying to get your next target or whatever, and it could target the thing to the left or the right, and you're not, you know. So like if they would have made it to where it's just like on, you know, like a circular path or whatever, where you have your target in the center and you can just rotate around it, that probably would have fixed so much of my combat problems that I had, you know.
Well, then you would have sort of a dodge mechanic, especially when the little goat demon things come running at you and so on like that. You could sidestep out of the way and so on like that. Because that's even too if the auto target. For the most part, it works, but there's many a times where like Aya will point to an enemy that's not the one coming right at you. Don't you point to the one the farthest away? You know, which that's always a classic of anything auto, you know, aiming, is that at some point it's going to aim at something that's nowhere near you.
Yeah. And I do like it because it gives you a visual, as comparatively to something like Resident Evil that also has a lock-on mechanic, but it's not visual based, you know, like, I mean, other than the physical model aiming around the, you know, the room or whatever. And you just, like in that game, you just basically just point in the direction, and more often than not, you're going to hit, you know. So I do enjoy that about this game, but I wish that some of its control schemes surrounding it, again, with tank controls, side by side with a lock-on mechanic, like it could have been done so much better, in my opinion. So
yeah, no, it definitely is. Well, it's that one, like if you didn't have the RPG mechanics, it would make this game really tough. I feel it's the upside is the RPG mechanics kind of pad that a bit, because the upside is even if you take some damage, like, well, cast heal, whoop, there we go. You know, that kind of like buffers you a lot. And I mean, generally that's always the one thing that makes RPG mechanics kind of nice, is they can almost fix like a little bit wonky gameplay and make up for it, you know, where like, let's just say if you did not have, say Aya had no abilities in this one, she's like, I'm just never going to use those abilities again, just toss them out. That would make this game actually quite tough.
Oh yeah. No, if this was straight up a Resident Evil clone and got rid of all PE abilities and whatnot, I don't think I would nearly have as much of an opinion about, you know, because I do genuinely like this game. I know I've probably come off a bit negative, you know, but like I genuinely do like this game. I just struggled with it this last run, you know.
Yeah. No, it was weird because it's like as I thought about it too. It's like because you had your real struggles, and then I felt I felt kind of the other way where I was like, wow, I thought this game was actually going to be harder. Now, granted, there would be certain areas that would just get me. Like you think you're doing great, room, and then you go into one room and just that was it. You know, it's just some enemy just got the way upper hand on you, and then it's like, okay, go back to that save and let's go back to those rooms again. That happened multiple times where, you know, you kind of took it for granted that you were doing great, and one other enemy type comes in, and that was it, you know. But or like, I even told you when I got to the second disc at the very beginning, I was like, dude, like literally one of those stupid goat things that hit me once in the very beginning when like it finally let me like have the controls again, and I went flying off a cliff, and that was game over.
That's so funny, because after you told me that, because like I didn't remember that scene at all, you know, and then like I get to it finally, and then I see what you're talking about, and I'm just like, oh god. Out of curiosity, so I died in that fight. And what's really interesting is that you physically have to change to disc 2 to get to this area or whatever. And So I died in that fight. I didn't get knocked off the cliff like you did, but I died in that fight, expecting it to go, oh, put back in disc 1 or whatever. There must be some kind of mirror like copy of parts of disc 1 onto disc 2 or whatever, because it never had me actually put disc 1 back in. It reloaded my save back in Dry Town or whatever. I went through that last little bits of the, you know, the dialogue and whatnot to be able to get to disc 2, and then it loaded disc 2. So like I thought that was actually kind of neat. It was like, oh, the developers did take this into account. You know, the players might die on this fight where there's no save in between disc swaps, you know. So
yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what happened, because when you said that, like, oh, that makes sense and everything like that. You know, because I just put the disc 1 back in and then just went from there. I didn't even question it. I was like, well, that was where my last save was at.
Yep.
You know, but yeah, it's weird because, like, it's weird when games don't have a save between discs. I don't know why they don't think that should be like a thing. Like the disc you save,
the start
and then you
of this too should
have a save.
You know?
Yeah,
exactly.
Because Parasite Eve 1 does the same thing too. I don't think it has a save either. You know, and even some of those other, I want to say even Alone in the Dark, when we played the New Nightmare, didn't have a save between discs either. I thought that was another strange choice. You know, yeah. So there is some of those things there where just got knocked off. Of course, there's a cliff right there. Well, because what I did, I pulled the gun out to shoot the goat. The goat hit me first. I flew backwards, and there I went. And that was it. Yep, there's nothing I could do.
Which funny in that encounter, I noticed that, you know, so when you do dodge these things, because when these llama style monsters or whatever, when they lock onto you, they put their head down, they rub the ground twice, they sprint right at you or whatever. It doesn't matter what you do from that point. If you move out of the way, they're still going to continue that line. So you totally can just stand at the edge there or whatever and just dodge llamas left and right, and they'll just continually just jump off and kill themselves like over and so it's a quick way to get through that fight. You don't have to actually fight them. That's
probably why that's there. I thought about that, but I was like, I'm not risking myself going standing there.
Exactly.
Because I know what's going to happen. 1, 2, and the third one will get me. Yeah. Because that battle actually goes on for a while. You fight because at first I was like, is this what I'm supposed to do? Am I supposed to keep killing these things? Because there's like 15 or 20. Yeah, there's a lot of them here, you know. Of course, guess who ran away? Kyle. You know, why would he stay and like fight?
Yep.
Yeah, that one's kind of a bizarre one too. But going into some of those, I just want to kind of go to some of those other like interesting puzzles that they have, because there's some of these things that I remember, like, even though I didn't back in the day, I didn't get a play through this like initially and whatnot. But I do remember just from reading in Game Pro and all kinds of stuff, there's a lot of these things in this game that are very infamous and so on like that especially for the time, but they were big things. But like that one puzzle in Dry Town where it's like, it tells you little clues throughout the way, but it really wants you to go through and collect, how many urinals did you see? How many mirrors did you find? How many this, that, and like... One of those puzzles that back in the day, if once you found those clues, you're like, well, I guess I got to go and run through every single one of those rooms one more time, and collect all that information. I mean, the easy one was the how many telephones, because you could literally hit the menu and go, that's right, that's how many telephones.
There's 2 or 3. Yep.
Yeah, I think there's 4 telephones even, because there's the one there. There's one in like the one in Aya's apartment or whatever room. And so
that's right. That's right. Yeah.
It won the trailer with the
trailer.
With the hillbilly guy and so on. But that puzzle, I remember that one's like, I remember reading about that puzzle, because that was, I remember you used to be like mail that would come in and people would be frustrated by that puzzle, being like, dude, I can't believe they made me have to go back and check all that stuff.
Yep. That was my trigger point, getting to that puzzle, because leading up until then, like, I mean, the puzzles leading up to this point, like, are pretty simple. It's just grab the key, open the door, more or less. That one in particular was the first one to where I was like, yep, polling guide. Like, I'm not sitting there dealing with that. Like, I'm not trying to, because again, like, I was already behind, at this point, so, but.
Yeah, that's one of those ones, like, because I ran, and I've probably only found a couple of the clues too. I think like you run across them and so on, and they give you these little things there. But then it's like I ran across the safe there, and I was like, oh, this is the one. This is that. This is that section there. And I was like, yeah, okay. And that item is that one of those items that has no description on it to tell you anything, but it gives you 25% extra defense if you hold on to it.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
The one you get from there. So I was like, okay. But yeah, that puzzle was really goofy. There's also another part, while we're in Dry Town, the other scene that I remember being like, very like, there's the old where Aya has the shower CG scene, which I remember like back in the day, that was that. Well, those like those ones that were always in like the talked about ones, and I remember that used to fall in line with all those like rumor eras of like the 90s and 2000s. No different than like in Pokemon, like how if you push the truck next to the ship, the SS and that there's supposed to be a Mew underneath there. You know, just like the Lara Croft in number 3, how if she dives in a certain pond, she comes up naked. Like all these, I don't even know where these stem from, but they spread like wildfire. And I remember because the Aya Brea one was supposed to be like if you got like an S rank or something like the very end, there was a post credits cutscene where it was like she was fully naked in the the shower scene.
Yeah, it's a bunch of horny fucking 10-year-old.
And I just love because that was just that time period where you really couldn't question it that much. There wasn't enough like research out there. Like you just hear this across the playground.
No, dude, this is the my uncle works at Nintendo era. You know, like So.
Yeah, and me and Dunnigan, we always referred to that kid. We always called him a jerk off Johnny. It was a kid that seemed to know way more about everything before anybody else did. He most likely probably lived at like his grandma's house and didn't have like his actual parents weren't there. The grandma was barely watching him. Maybe she was sitting down watching TV, smoking cigarettes. You know, she would occasionally yell, "Bill," or "Johnny, don't do that," but never get up and do anything. You know, he was the one who had all the Playboy stuck under his bed. You know, that's the guy who for some reason had this like extra knowledge. That you once again you didn't know if it was true or not. You just lived in this rumor mill kind of time. And I remember because this game was one of those ones that fit in that same ballpark era. Yeah, it would pop up in Game Pro magazines and tips and tricks where they would question if that was real or not and so on.
So that's another thing I gotta look up real quick. I'm curious what the budget of Parasite Eve 2 was because I almost guarantee that a huge portion of it went into this cutscene that you're talking about. It's like development time and like actual money spent and whatnot. Because it's a really like good looking scene, for its time and whatnot. And that's one credit that I'll give to Parasite Eve in general. Across the first and second game is like for its era, its CGI is so good and like I love the morphing of things and whatnot, like the chick in the Acropolis Tower early on in the game, where you go into the cafe and she's like, sitting there or whatever, and Aya comes up and she's like, "Oh, are you okay?" and blah blah blah, and then it turns around and it turns into like a scary monster and it's like transformations and stuff. Like it's very obvious. Like Square definitely dumped a ton of money into its CGI, its cutscenes, its storytelling and whatnot. So.
Well, that's the one that I do kind of wonder because this game just looks extremely good. But I almost kind of wonder if that was kind of the reason why Square never really came back to it, just including Parasite Eve 3, the third birthday, is that I felt like maybe they put too much into this. And I always kind of wondered, did they maybe not just get their money back the same way? Like, I think of this game being really popular, but I'm not too sure how well this one actually totally sold. It might have just been like one of those ones where they were expecting maybe some Final Fantasy money mixed with Resident Evil, and they didn't get close to that. And I think that might have been what kind of put them off from really doing more. Because I hate to start say a PSP game doesn't really. I like the third birthday, but like that kind of tells me that like that's like when you do like it's not a main game anymore. It's a handheld now. Yeah. We're putting it at that kind of level.
Yeah. Well, according to Google AI, Parasite Eve does not have any public budgets or that type of stuff, but
that sounds very Japanese.
So Final Fantasy 9 reportedly took about 40 million, so I can imagine that this is probably a 10 or 15 million dollar project, something like that. So but
yeah, well, because and a lot of times I think these games, I think they especially use these as like also call them experimental games that they can try things out. No different than like what Dino Crisis was for Resident Evil, because it's one of those ones that if you mess up Dino Crisis, who cares? That's not Resident Evil, you don't want to mess up the Golden Goose one, Yep. And I think that's kind of with this one, but like that's one of those ones. But that Aya scene, whenever I saw it, there it's just one of those ones. You're like, oh yeah, there's that scene. There it is. There's that famous one, and it's shot very cinematically and so on like that. And that's actually one thing I will say about this game too is how cinematic this game kind of rolls and everything. It's very close to being like Metal Gear Solid. If it really just had voice acting in it, it would be on that same level because just the way that it's set up and the camera angles and everything like that, it resorts back to reading, but it's kind of weird because the like all the text for the most part, it actually goes like you're almost watching it like a movie. It's not like you can read it, press X, press X, press X. No, you actually have to let it roll through. And it kind of, it's just strange for all the money they did kind of put it. I'm kind of almost surprised it doesn't have voice acting.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Because I think that this game, in its current form, could have benefited from that. I really do. If they would have went full, and again, like I think that they were taking like half measures here, where it's like they had an idea where it's like, oh, Resident Evil's doing fantastic, you know, like that style game. Like we want to mirror that, but we want to use PE because people know PE. The first game was received well enough. You know, I'd be curious to see like what reaction of that exact time really was, you know, to this. Because again, like I think that it's number one thing is it's environmental storytelling and it's, you know, just overall production of like exactly what you're talking about. Of that era, I mean, because like you got to think, you know, there's Metal Gear, there's Final Fantasies, you know, out there 7, 8, you know, ish around this time era and whatnot. But like, what else was like really doing stuff like this on that scale? You know,
There's actually, this is the other one that's kind of a big one for that time period. I want to say it actually has generally full voice acting, but it's Fear Effect.
Okay, yeah.
And Fear Effect actually has a remake coming out, or like a remaster coming out in like later this year or maybe next year. It's weird they don't put the second one out there too at the same time. I feel, but whatever. Like that game though, because I remember those games were very cinematic. Siphon Filter was another one that kind of fits into that ballpark where they had full voice acting, they had full cutscenes.
No, like I said, I think
there's not tons of them, but there's a handful.
Yeah, this game would have totally benefited from it. I feel that you know, there's just too many scenes that are just way too quiet. You know, it's like, I don't know, there's like ambient noise going on, like there's a fire in the background or something like that, you know, but like to sit there in more or less a quiet environment with two characters that are just animatronically motioning, you know, while text is physically rolling by that I'm not controlling or whatever. Admittedly, like I think that's where I kind of lost the plot in some regard is like I would, and this is just my own brain, you know, but like I have struggled like sometimes like reading, you know, where like I'm like reading a sentence and like my brain hits a trigger word and it just whoop, you know, it goes off in the distance. And the next thing I know is I read 3 paragraphs, not really reading, but thinking about whatever I was thinking about, you know, and that was happening consistently in this game. And you can't really go back other than reloading a save, you know, to go get some of that information and whatnot. So I was constantly on ChatGPT and like on YouTube and whatnot, like rewatching scenes, you know, just so I could get somewhat of a semblance of it. Because at the end of the day, I think it wasn't well done in that regard, and it ultimately for me it was boring. You know, I didn't really enjoy this story so much comparatively to the first. So.
Yeah. I still like the story quite a bit in this one. I don't think it's as dialed in as the first one. I think everything about the first one's just firing on all cylinders. I think this one's a little bit more slimmed and trimmed down and kind of just takes the bare basics of the mitochondria type stuff and runs with it like a bioweapon type thing and making it feel like an episode of X-Files. That's really what I came across. And strange enough, is somebody who generally prefers reading over voice acting. I've always been that kind of person. Depends on what the game is, of course. But like for most stuff, like that's why I think like in Parasite Eve 1, I think the voice, it works great like that because you read it, you know you're in control of it and everything like that. This is that one where, because maybe you're not totally in control of it, I feel like this is that few where I'd be like, I think voice acting would actually make the game better. Like that's one of the few times for me personally, as someone who doesn't necessarily like voice acting, I think that this is the game that actually would have probably benefited because the scenes play out like they're cut scenes, like Metal Gear Solid in a sense. But and instead it's, you're not like clicking through the dialogue, like, you know, reading it at your own pace. You're literally waiting for it to go through. And it's not like it's too slow or anything like that.
No.
You know, because sometimes that bothers me in certain games where you see like the text come up and it's like you're like, Jesus, like how long is this gonna take to get through this? Like we're reading it like what, like a first grade level here, like, come on.
Like Pokemon, every time I start Pokemon, go fast text every time before I even start the experience because like screw the slow text then. So
you know, it's one of those ones I want that text to go by as fast as possible, but because I could read that fast, but this is one of those ones where it's weird in a sense, for the fact of how much they dump into the graphics and everything else about this game, that they don't have the voice acting in here, or at least just partial voice acting. I think that would have kind of done it for just those main scenes. Like, well, once in a blue moon, I will say this: there is the odd voice sound that will appear like 5 times in the entire game. Like a character will have one line that they say. It's so weird because it throws you off. You're like, what the hell was that?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, even it sounds weird. I would even take it if even if they just had Japanese voices and with subtitles.
Sure.
I think that in itself would have actually been good enough for it. Because that's mostly a lot of times my favorite way, especially in like modern games. If it's a Japanese game, other than like Resident Evil or something like that, I pretty much almost always be like, nope, we're not having the English voices. I want the Japanese one so I can at least partially read it. You know, or you'd be like the crazy person like myself. I didn't like to having the voices in Final Fantasy VII Remake, so I just turned them off completely. So I had to watch the cutscenes where like I was reading it, but if you were watching it over my shoulder, I'd be like,
yeah.
it probably looks so weird. I was like, I don't want to ruin my Final Fantasy, like in my brain, what these characters all sound like.
Yeah. See, but in another common theme that gets brought up on this podcast with you very often is like a remake potential. I think that this game, more so than the first game, absolutely. If they just went Acropolis Tower, you go to Dry Town, you go to the labs, you go do the fights and all that, over the shoulder style, new age RE remakes and things of that, like this totally would work for that. I feel, anyways.
I agree.
Dry Town would be super cool to see in an over shoulder perspective, like in something like Unreal or whatever, yeah. So I mean, but at the same time, like, so the little bit of research that I did do into this post episode was, so apparently the writer of the novel and like the creator of the Parasite Eve universe just fucking hates these games. And like is basically telling Square like no more, which is why the third birthday exists and not technically a Parasite Eve title. They use the likeness of it, change the title and whatnot, but apparently the creator just fucking hates this. So the chances of, because I started to do a little bit of research into like Reddit and whatnot of just like how popular really is this? It's insanely popular with people, but again the actual creator of it hates it, and it's probably never going to happen.
Well.
So.
It kind of makes sense because when I watched that movie, the Parasite Eve movie that's based off the book, which they say it's pretty darn accurate. It is a lot different though. It's not like if you were expecting it to be kind of like the game or like Aya Brea's stories and stuff like that. It's like no, it's a lot more like like a very science horror kind of like thinking man's kind of one, and just going through that. So I could see where the guy's like, what the heck? You turned my thing into some goofy anime, like. I could see that guy just being a real serious novelist and just being like, I didn't want it to, turn into, pretty much like some almost like shonen like run of like, here's this like weird adventure. And especially as it kind of went on. And I guess that makes sense that why Parasite kind of just fell to the wayside, why it's called the third birthday for the third one. Because in a sense, they made Aya and everything like that. They really just kind of took that, core concept. Say they really could just shift things around just enough and be like, okay, well, Aya's not battling the mitochondria anymore. Let's just go.
Yep.
You know what? It wouldn't take a whole lot to put Aya, just take the character, which I think is the most important part in the gameplay, and just put her into a brand new situation.
Yeah.
Just she's some form of police, FBI. She works for Mist. I don't care what it is. But just make her fight some type of new bioterror.
Well, and I think like you could almost like reboot this series, or at least like kind of think of like the way they did like from Devil May Cry to DMC, like that version where to do something like that to where you could gut it out of this tank controlled static background style game, relaunch into a over the shoulder action shooter or whatever, and have the history of Aya be this like the forefront of that game, give her the parasite abilities and all that, or even just make her an antagonist of the next game, and like she goes off the handle, like whatever, and like she becomes the next Eve, and like she's the main antagonist or whatever. There's so many things that you could do with this, to where it wouldn't have to particularly be Parasite Eve, so.
Yeah, because you could run off that, and one of these days, whenever we play the third birthday, because I would love to play that one again. That one is the over-the-shoulder style in a sense. I mean, it's kind of the early days of that kind of gameplay, but it has a lot of that in there, which is kind of just interesting to see in itself. But there is definitely a lot for potential for that too, and this is one of those games where it's like it's just the concept of having your survival horror fused with RPG mechanics. I think that's such a cool one that once again nobody else really uses. I mean, closest thing maybe is Resident Evil 4 and 5 for the fact that you pick up ammo or you pick up money and you can buy stuff. Kind of gives it a variant of that,
Yeah.
you know. Or Dino Crisis 2 even is kind of in there. But the fact that like having the actual level up abilities and so on, especially like the first one, where you do actually get the stats and you can put those towards your abilities and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Because what I just love about the first one is how like customizable all that stuff is. Because that's the only thing when I think about this one here. As much as I do like Parasite Eve 2, it is just trimmed and slimmed down where the RPG mechanics there, and it's definitely more there than say like a Mass Effect 2 where it pretty much is like, it's just there to like make you feel like it is, but it's really doing nothing. This one still does stuff and still has, you know, your abilities. It's just, I feel like it's after a while, it's like once you kind of get the abilities that you kind of want, you're kind of like, oh, okay, you know,
Yeah,
that's about all I need. You know, these battles are almost. I have enough money and I have enough experience. The battles almost start to become kind of pointless. You know, they don't. You know, you can't just keep going through them. You know, I mean, you can, but you know, they lose their luster.
Yep. No, and I think like, you know, there's a handful of things that happen to me again, like, you know, like starting early, taking a couple of days off, like feeling like, okay, now I got to put the time back in. Let's start moving through this. And then you get like really far ahead of me. You like you go to the next disc or whatever, and then it's like, okay, like now I need to speed up. Let's get through this. Blah blah blah. And again, it wasn't a problem the entire time. Like I'm just, you know, like I would do some encounters. I'm not dodging like everything. I'm not just running through, just trying to get the story bits of the game. But I was doing it in a way to where I would do some encounters, but not others. You know, just trying to get through it. And then like getting to the end of the game. So this is one piece, like, so from this moment onwards on this podcast, like I still will play some original games here and there or whatever, but this game absolutely was like my breaking point where it's like, nope, Spence's been talking about emulation for the better part of the last 3 or 4 months on this podcast with me. Like I've survived this far and it hasn't been a problem leading up to this, but now I'm finally to the point where, dude, I can't tell you the amount of times of like, okay, I'm at the end. I'm like, I've got the last 2 fights to go through. I got the last 2 bosses. All right, now I understand, like, okay, I got to go grind a little bit. So I'm going to go grind. And then I go and I do that. And I spend, you know, an hour and a half, 2 hours grinding through that. I'm on my way back to go hit the fucking save so where I could save again. And then like the room before my save point, I die. And then it's just like, and then I got to restart. And it's like, okay, restart your brain, get over that, whatever, you know, like restart all over again, grind, and then you die again. And then again, and again, and again, and again. And just like, dude, it just got to a point, like when you text me yesterday and you're like, so what's progress looking like? And I'm like, I'm just, dude, I'm so broken at this point. Like, no, like, you know?
Because, you know, because really the only thing that made the emulation sort of different is I just used the save states. That was my only thing. But like, you know, because I felt like I didn't need, you know, like the first Parasite Eve, I like it for, because that was the one where I kept telling you, like, the speed up thing makes a difference in this game. It's because of how long it takes to get some of those battles to go, you know. But this one, it's like, really, it is just nice to have that save state. So, you know, plus then you have your multiple saves too, just in case if something fails you. Because a lot of times, even nowadays, my other big fear is when I'm playing on physical copies, especially disc ones, is I would hate to get to say like 3/4 of a game and then have the disc not be able to load apart because it had that one minor scratch on there, you know, that isn't unheard of. You know, I remember back in the day, my buddy had one of his Final Fantasy VII copies, and there was a part where it froze and Barrett was just shooting his machine gun back and forth. We let it sit there for 45 minutes, like maybe it will make it. Never did. You know, you pull the disc out, you know, you try to clean it, put it back in, and so on. But that's always my other kind of fear, is that it's going to get to that point where you're like, great, and now your only option is, do I go out and buy another disc? You know? That's the only thing. But no, it's just those save states of this one, because, you know, there's always some of those rooms that, like, you know, especially when you're training. I hate to sort of say that's where it really comes in, because nothing's worse than doing a bunch of training and then you die on like the 15th battle, and then it's like, oh. It's not like it's like one of those ones where it's like, oh, I have to run through 15 rooms, whatever. Okay, I know where to go. So then when you do it, you're like, it goes by like, you know, more than twice as fast.
Yep.
Training's the one you don't want to lose any of that progress. That is not fun one bit to have to go back and you know. But I think by the fact of pulling out the old using the old PlayStation emulator and just being able to have those save states just so you have that peace of mind. I think that's why it almost makes why I think your experience is a little bit burnt out because of the hardships you had to go through.
Oh yeah.
Where mine, I don't. As I said, there's like minute stuff that kind of I think is a little bit like not up to par in this one, but for the most part, I had a very positive experience.
Yeah.
Like mostly I really enjoyed this game actually way more than I even thought I was going to. I mean, I knew I was going to like it, but just for the fact of how much I liked the first one.
Yeah. Yeah. And I knew this like walking into it too, like, because like I got through the first game pretty easily. Like again, like towards the end of the original Parasite Eve, like there is a difficulty wall for sure, when you get to the end of it. But I had prepared throughout that whole experience. Whereas here, maybe I just forgot. Maybe I and I text you at one point like last week where I'm in grind mode at this point, and I'm like, bro, like I just genuinely don't remember struggling this hard when I was like 10, 11 years old, like playing through this for the first time. And I again, like it's all on me. It's 100% on me. This is, and I'll just explain to the audience real quick. This is a very good game. If you like the original Parasite Eve, it's a different game for sure. But if you like Parasite Eve in general and just like that theme, that tone, that world, that universe, like this game is very, very good. It's a cool take on how survival horror was being developed of that era. And like I said, it's got its faults for sure. But I think like in general, like this was like a very fun experience to go back to for me, re-experience those cutscenes, re-experience those very bombastic, like that's the other piece that we kind of skipped out on a little bit is just like the boss fights in this game. The set pieces and boss fights are so sick. They're so much fun.
No, I think there's some of the stuff in here that does like give Resident Evil a run for its money, like how good it kind of gets. Especially like one of those ones is just after the shower scene, of course, which threw me for a curveball because this is one of those ones where I remember like because it just after that cutscene, it just throws you outside, be like, oh yeah, this big giant cannon mouth guy who's showing up like a kaiju just walking down the street, coming over there, and you're like, oh okay. And the only gun I had equipped is because I was using at this point there was like that single shot pistol, and I was using that one because I was like, okay, well the nice thing about this gun is it doesn't do a whole lot of damage, but it's very conservative, and I don't blow through my ammo like the other pistol that you start off with does. Well, that was the only gun I had, and it was like my grenade launcher was in Aya's backpack, but it wasn't in like wasn't in my armor. So I just happened to I got kind of knocked between two windows that was right below Aya's room. And for some reason, the monster could only hit me with one attack there. So every other attack would just miss. So I just sat there, just went bam, bam, bam. Nice. And I just kept casting because I had the defense spell by that point. So I would cast that, and I just went there. I was like, okay. And I finally did defeat it with that pistol, which I thought I was actually kind of proud of. Like boy, talk about like the longest way to go about that. Yeah, I thought that fight was really cool too, and just to kind of give like a visual, if you're familiar at all with Doom, is like it looks like the Mancubus basically from Doom, whereas that thing, the Mancubus got like cannons on its arms that it shoots and whatnot. This thing just like has its fucking just like large, just tubular thing sticking out of its mouth that's just like flamethrower, and like that's its like big thing is that it has this flamethrower mouth thing or whatever, I remember that fight when I was younger, and then like going back and just like remembering how goofy it was, like because again, like the most like incredible cutscene you've ever seen, like leading up to this point, like in gaming history. You watch that, and then all of a sudden it throws you out into a balcony, and you're just like fighting this large mancubus thing, and it's just like, what is going on? Like there's wonky things in Parasite Eve in general, but like that one in particular, I was like, that's a little out of left field, but cool fight, regardless. Yeah, it's a cool giant monster battle and so on. There's apparently a part though that can change the course of the game right there. It's apparently if you take too long, which I'm surprised I didn't take too long because I had literally the weakest gun in the game fighting it, is the dog Flint can run out there and get smashed. That can change later on there. So of course the dog was survived a mine, but it'd be interesting. It's like, oh yeah, and then like the dude that has the one survivor guy there, whatnot, gets pissed at you, and he doesn't give you the machine gun or whatever, and so on, and probably a couple other things later on in the game. because there is a couple things that change the story, and I will say that like I got kind of like I guess what they consider the sad ending in the thing, which seems like if you just kind of run through, there's one major thing that I didn't realize you could do, which is pretty much how you get like in a sense the good ending. Like, there's technically 3 endings, but it's generally a good ending and then just a simple ending. I guess the best way they call it the sad ending, but. Is I didn't realize that once you're in the laboratory, there's actually a part where you can literally run all the way back, go through the caves, and you can go back to Dry Town. And then there's a mission back there that you can go do, and you can find Pierre or whatever. I must have just missed it because I did not even notice that until I read through like the strategy guide later on, and I was like, "Oh, that would have made a lot of sense there."
Because that's the do you bring the ice to, right?
Yeah. Which because I always wonder because you see the ice thing there, and they always do the thing like, "I don't need ice." Like, okay.
Yep. So I did all that. I was on pace to do the good ending or whatever. Obviously, didn't complete, but yeah. I'm actually kind of curious too to see like, so from what I understand, so multiple endings, and then there's a new game plus mode in here too. And I'm kind of curious to see like what a new game plus run would be like, in terms of expediency and things like that. Because I don't think there's going to be much in terms of story that's going to change outside of those couple branching paths, throughout the experience. But I'm curious like what new game plus actually means, to the game.
Yeah, well, because I kind of looked up on that too, because I have the strategy guide, so I was kind of reading all that stuff, actually beforehand, and because New Game Plus offers there's a handful of different modes. You get one that's just called like replay mode, and it pretty much just gives you like here's generally like, I think you get the majority of, I don't know if they take away some of your stuff, but you have your BP, you have all your like experience and so on like that, so you can just go plow through there. You got all the unlocked guns and whatnot, and you can just do a speed run pretty much and just go through the game. Which I thought about doing. As I said, the only thing that made me kind of go, was that stupid sliding puzzle. As I said, because you have to do that one. Everything else would be fine because you would just look it up, you would just look up the puzzles. Because actually, I'll say the one other really goofy puzzle that if you did not have a guide is there's that one where you have to hack it to the computer and it has Maya and Aya's name as the password, but it's like, but you have to go find that Eris book that has the combination in there that makes you have to rotate the letters backwards and by 3 or it was the weirdest thing. I tried to figure it out and I still literally was kind of like, that one was quite ultra complex, you know?
Yeah, because when I saw the answer to that one in the guide, I was like, how would you like, because I think back to this era of just like, I mean, internet's like around, but like hardly anybody's using it and whatnot. Most people like grab a disc from Blockbuster, they go home, they play the game over the weekend, how would you figure out some of these things, like, I don't know.
Yeah, that one is like that's one of those ones. If you take the guide out of the equation, like that probably might be the most stumbling puzzle of them all in here. Because at least the upside of the urinals and the phone one, you don't technically need to open that thing, so you're only just missing on an item. The slide puzzle, you can almost just kind of eventually you'll make your way through it. It might take a long time like that, but this one's the one where it's like, you need it to progress through the game and like.
Well, and again, like, I think back to my 10, 11 year old self, like playing through this for the first time. And like, because I've beaten this game before, I don't recall, like, was it one of those things, like maybe it was something my uncle was helping me with or something, like, who knows? But there's a lot of questioning of myself, of just like, how did my younger self get through this, which I think is like a core theme of this podcast in general.
Yeah, it reminds me of one of those ones that like, you would have pulled up, because I remember like, in the magazine, especially because I had GamePro and whatnot, because I think I literally have the Parasite Eve guide from there too. That would be where you'd hopefully find it in, or a tips and tricks or something like that, because those guides mostly kind of came out pretty darn close to the games anyways. So, you would have at least that ability, but gosh, beyond that though, yeah, some of those ones, it was pretty, I tried to figure it out just by, looking at it and going backwards. But yeah, that one definitely would have been the tough one. But at least you can look those ones up to make for your speed runs. But as I say, and going back to like the New Game Plus, so you have that mode. Then they have like another mode that's called like bounty mode, I think what it is. And it's kind of like the hard mode where Aya takes, I think, twice as much damage. She does half as much. Yeah, it sounds terrible. She does maybe half as much damage, and then they add in a bunch of those, like we forgot to even mention these guys, but there's these like almost like the main antagonists throughout the game is there's these kind of like gas mask looking, monkey looking men with these big long arms and everything like that and so on that you fight multiple times, and Aya keeps running into them. She runs into the one guy at the tower, she runs into one in Dry Town, and so on. And then you learn later down the line that the story is that they're all being created here in this factory underground and whatnot, because we've gone from, like, in a sense, Aya's mission, I know we're kind of getting to the story like way now, but like Aya's mission is that, like, also when she gets to Dry Town and explores there just to figure out what the heck, you know, bioterrorism stuff's going on, is that there's a bomb shelter. And in this bomb shelter, you know, it's, you know, it starts off just in these, like, you know, almost like an old mine, goes down to like a Resident Evil looking laboratory, but then it goes down even farther, and there's literally like this very Soma looking area down below where there was like, here's where we're gonna live out the rest of our days. You know, we have fresh fish, we have all, you know, all these things down here, and we have these, you know, creations, you know, all these, you know, mutagens that we've been making. And then you also learn that they've taken Aya's DNA, and that's how they've created all these monsters. So all these monsters are partially related to Aya, because she has the best, you know, DNA of everything, you know, and throughout all this stuff. But there's those guys, those monkey men guys. So apparently what it does in that bounty mode is it puts a bunch of them in there, so you fight them almost kind of like Nemesis, where they appear and they are kind of strong, but they give you more experience points and so on. And then I want to say there's another mode where it's meant to be, I can't remember what it is, but it's almost like you're supposed to, they give you like almost no items. So you have to play the game almost like you have to run through everything and try to dodge stuff and so on like that.
No, so the way I played.
Yeah. And then there's a very final mode called Nightmare Mode that combines everything together. So Aya takes 3 times the damage now. She gets like almost no items. She does like 1/3 the damage. It just sounds terrible. Even the guy in the official strategy guy's like, I didn't even play this mode. It was that like pain in the ass.
Like, why? You know, like, yeah, no thanks.
Yeah, like I think playing the replay, just the regular replay mode, would be totally fun. Like, I feel the bounty mode would be kind of, I guess if you want a little bit extra challenge and so on, there's some more things you can unlock. You can unlock a gunblade like Squall, which is kind of cool. But just going through just the regular replay mode, because now I have that grenade launcher unlocked where it has multiple rounds in it, so you don't, because that's the only thing about the grenade launcher. It's like the generally the best gun in the game, but you have to reload it every single time, which makes it kind of a pain in the ass at the same time. It really was kind of like the best gun, but yeah, still because of that one feature. So if you have a grenade launcher that has just, you know, 20 rounds, so you just boom, 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 just going in there, that might make it kind of fun. But as I said, there's the only thing that kind of kept me from doing a replay, because I even thought about doing it this morning. I was like, you know, maybe I'll sit down, just, you know, I bet you I could blast through it in 4 hours or something like that. But I was like, I thought about that puzzle. I literally thought about that slide puzzle. And I was like, man. Yeah.
Just don't want to get to that point again.
Yeah, that's the only thing. That's almost why I kind of almost give Parasite Eve 1 kind of credit for the fact that it really doesn't have any puzzles. It makes for the replayability that much better, though. It's the same thing with Dino Crisis 2, because sometimes puzzles can be like the thing. It's like, don't get me wrong, I love a good puzzle, but if you want to play something over and over again and you have kind of a pain in the ass puzzle, it's like, do I want to do that? Because it's always going to be a pain. It's not like, oh, I know the solution. I just do click, 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 boom, there it goes. No, it's not that kind of puzzle.
But I think it's the same thing. Like with so Alone in the Dark, New Nightmare that we just played. Which, by the way, there's a Game Boy port of that on Switch 2, on the Game Boy, you know, whatever NSO thing or whatever. I played a little bit of that. It's hilarious, the comparison. But
it's actually really impressive for a Game Boy Color game.
I know.
It's one of those ones where it's like it doesn't really play the greatest, but the fact when you look at it and you go, holy crap, I'm surprised someone got graphics like this on a Game Boy Color.
Yeah, exactly. But similar with that game, like I probably won't play that game again for a very long time just because of some of its puzzles. And I'm just like, no thanks. But
yeah, but yeah, no, it's like I think Parasite Eve 2 is one of those ones. Still, at the end of the day, I would actually kind of rank it quite high. If you said the golden age of survival horrors, which I say is pretty much just PS1 and PS2, you know, that kind of section there, I think it's actually up there. Maybe not top 5, but very close. Like it's like a 6 or a 7. You know what I mean? No specific order, but of course I love Parasite Eve 1, Dino Crisis 2. Resident Evil 1, 2, 3. Well, really 1 and 3 is my 2 favorites of that. But
so when I got into retro collection again about 2 years ago, PE2 was the first like expensive copy of something that I purchased. And yeah, I'm stoked to have it. I really wish I could have completed this run just because of the satisfaction I got out of PE1 in physical form, you know, and like because I had just bought that game, you know, on eBay or whatever for our episode. We played through it. It felt good.
Mm-hmm.
I will eventually. This will happen sooner or later. But for right now, I am so far beyond frustrated and just done with the experience, you know. Cool game, awesome experience, but the way that I played it, do not play that way.
Yeah, I think the key thing is I feel like this is make sure that you look at the map and you see those red rooms and you clear them out every single time. It's like one of those ones you got to put the work in. If you don't put the work in, I think that's what got you. Because for the most part, other than like once in a while I would run into an enemy that would just get the upper hand on me because that does happen in the game, and then you go crap. Okay, reload. Let's do this again. Granted, probably what the thing to do is the enemy gets an upper hand on you, just exit really quickly. I a lot of times would always forget to do that. Like I would try to be like, oh, I can man up and take this thing down, and then it would be like, nope.
Yep.
Where it's like restart and rethink your strategy.
So something that probably could have, and this is just like a developer mindset type thing, probably something that could have like assisted with my play style is if the game would have punished me more for leaving battles. The fact that you're only losing 10 BP when you leave a fight isn't enough to mitigate, because I saw that for the first time, you know, as I was playing through it or whatever earlier. And I saw it, I was like, oh, just negative 10 BP. I could skip 10 fights and be fine, you know, like to regain that 100 BP back is nothing, you know. It's like one fight, you know, basically to get that back. So if they would have came in with like a more harsh negative effect of leaving battle, of something more like, say, if they just multiplied it by 10 and just made it 100 BP every time you left a room, that probably would have slowed my ass down quite a bit more to be like, oh, well, now, you know, now if I do lose 10 fights, I'm losing 1,000 BP instead of 100 BP, you know, and like that may have been enough of a deterrent to allow me to play at the pace that I want to, but the fast paced like nature of that style play, but also have consequence behind it instead of the consequence being now you can't beat the final 2 fights. You know, because like that is what frustrated me more so than anything. So
yeah, unlike, you know, my run where like once I realized the red rooms existed, I killed everything. Except for I didn't go back to Dry Town. That was the only thing I missed out on. And I can't remember. Maybe there was a one of those phone calls that explains it or something, you know, somewhere along there. That's
probably.
Said go back to Dry Town. I said I didn't cross my mind that I could run all. The worst part too is I literally ran back to that where the Jeep was at or whatever, or the pickup truck. I went there, collected the enemy bounties, and then ran back. But I didn't realize you could get back in the vehicle and go or whatever the heck you have to do. But for the most part, and I think that's what made mine. As I said, like by killing everything, I was fully locked and loaded for that final boss. Like I had 100. I think I had almost 200 grenade rounds because I had both of them.
Yeah.
You know,
so my last runs, I was running in there with around 60. 60 is enough to take out the first fight, you know, and like destroy all the parts and whatnot of that fight. But walking into Eve, the 3 times that I made it to Eve in that fight with the final setup that I had. I walked into Eve's fight with about 12 grenades, and it's just not enough. And 800 rounds of M4, which is, you can do stuff with it, but not, you know, when you're only doing, you know, 50 damage per 3-round burst, you know, like knowing that, you know, especially after looking at the guide and being like, okay, what's the HP pool of Eve? And it's like 6K, you know, 6,500. And it's like, I'm gonna have to pull this trigger 60 fucking times, you know, or like 120 times, you know, like however many times to get through this fight. And eventually, like, the math just doesn't make sense. And that's where I got to last night. And I was just like, the third and final time I made it to her, didn't have enough rounds, had plenty of health, but had plenty of MP, had plenty of everything else, and I could have drug that out, but I was prolonging the inevitable. I was going to die regardless of how I cut it. You know, I couldn't out damage her. She was going to out damage me at some point in that fight, and it's just like, I'm done. I'm done. You know, like, now granted, I do have a save that's 2 hours back, and it's as you're entering the sewers, for the first time. So if I really wanted to, I totally could go back and probably get through this. But to complete 99.5%, 99.8% of this game, I'm like, that's good enough for me. I'm ready to have this episode. So
no, because that is the tough one right there. It's because I used a lot of grenades on her. So and I had the abilities. I had the defense one up. I had the attack one up. So I'd get criticals of like 600 damage off that one grenade shot once in a while.
Yeah.
So like it was kind of important to have that, And then I had the spinny ball things, which would come in handy. So like I was using all like the bells and whistles that I had. I had the ringer fluid to heal both my HP and MP. I had 3 of those, I think, attached. So like in a sense, I was in a pretty good place by the time I finally got there, and that was the key thing is you just kind of had to have that ammo surplus realistically. And it's too bad you couldn't just go, if you could go back and just sell the machine gun, just like they had that kind of feature, that would probably get you all the ammo you needed.
I am actually really surprised that there isn't a way to sell things in this game for BP. Like especially because like you can hang on to your armors and whatnot, and like each armor like has like a different effect or ability or whatever, but that may have helped too, like in some regard, because like I have like so much 9mm ammo that you just don't use in these final 2 fights. So why not just get rid of all that, sell the silence pistol, sell all the shit, and like be able to get, if I could just get a boost of like 5,000, 6,000 BP right now, I could easily finish this,
Yeah.
But the grind time to, the amount of like math that I'm doing in my head to be able to get through this fight, it just doesn't make sense. Like I can do it. Absolutely. But I'm going to sit here for another 4 hours. I
hate to sort of say, like, you could pretty much play half the game again, and be in a much better position, in that same amount of time it's going to take you to have to kind of re-level from this point on, and go through all that.
So take that as some warnings to our listeners. I think in this genre in general, like this game in particular, but I think this genre in general, take your time, go through it the way that it's meant to be played. There's ways to speedrun, and I think that this game is made even worse just because of the RPG elements associated with it. But I don't know, go at your own pace, but just know that if you really try to speedrun this particular title, like you're probably going to run into the same problems I did.
Well, it's that key thing. It's like, don't play it like it's a survival horror. Play it like it's an RPG. My kind of main thing in RPGs, for the most part, is you never skip a battle. That's almost like the key to success, and generally in RPG, is that you don't skip any battle, even if they seem very, very minuscule. You just like, no, it all adds up to the greater good. And so I think that's how I took this game. Is like, yep, we're gonna not skip a single battle. We're gonna make sure that we're as powerful as all can be, because that's what's gonna help us out in the end. And and I think that kind of is it, Even I would say, even speaking of there's a couple other interesting bosses that we never really touched on because we got kind of distracted on all the mechanics. But there's like that one that like the trash monster that's kind of like Kirby that you fight down below. I thought that's actually kind of a cool battle too, where he tries to absorb Aya in there, and then of course he throws out those little monsters that he'll eat for health and whatnot. And that was a perfect one where too. But once again, my grenade launcher just opens his mouth, blasts him a couple times in there.
So did you do reading the guide, I understand there's 2 different ways to kill this thing. You can outright kill it. You can just keep firing at it till it dies or whatever. And then I did the version where you send it into the trash compactor or whatever.
I did that too. I didn't realize that there was technically, because you battle him once and then like you're like, oh great, now he's coming after you and you got 5 minutes or whatever. Yeah. And then I went over.
In that countdown timer, that's where you can physically kill it if you choose to. You have to output a shitload of damage to do it, but you can apparently. So
it's probably one of those ones when you do a new game plus, that's probably the faster way in a weird way. If you're trying to get through that, you just probably blast the living daylights out of it there, especially if you got, upgraded, especially if you have that grenade launcher, you don't have to reload.
Yeah.
And then there's also a really good, once you kill that enemy and then that last 5 minutes you have, if you run back there, there's actually a good item that you get. I can't remember what the heck exactly it was, but there's something in a chest right where he starts off at. Yeah. That I think does more damage too. I want to say it's one of those items.
Yeah, I don't recall, but Yeah, I really enjoyed that fight a whole lot too. And again, like I think just in general, the set pieces and boss fights in this game are very, very solid. Even leading into the final couple fights, you know, that I keep referencing all episode, like because you essentially like fight this like large blob monster, you know, with multiple parts. He's got a stomach and he's got a head and he's got arms and legs and shit, you know, and like you start blowing off all these pieces or whatever. And then of course, like the Eve fight, you know, like the final Eve fight, her design is so cool looking, you know, like I really enjoyed that. Just didn't have the damage output to be able to get through it in this run, you know. It's really a shame.
Well, then even magic wise, what did you end up upgrading as far as your magic goes?
Kind of equally across the board, which is probably another reason why I fucked myself. You know, like I had pretty much level 2 everything, with the exception of like health. Health is one that I focused on early on to like, all right, I gotta get this to level 3. You know,
Yeah,
like
that was the first one. I maxed that one out. I didn't even question anything else until I had that one complete.
Mm-hmm. You know, antibody and energy shot and stuff, like they were useful, but I didn't use them all that much up until again, like, because I didn't feel like I really needed to until the ending fight. I had to use antibody level 3 to get through that first portion of the duel fight at the end. The few times that I did make it through, it's almost a necessity. Mostly because he opens up with that one attack that like, it's almost like he like harnesses the fucking sun or something and it shoots out that energy wave or whatever, you know. And yet again, I think because of camera angles, not having a quick turn, rubbing your nose against walls like constantly, you know, trying to get around, you know, the environment and whatnot, that ending arena, it's very circular, but it's up and down, you know, it's very vertical, you know, and whatnot too. There's too many times where I was in that, which also brought to the frustration of me eventually finally calling it quits, was just like there was too many times where that ability would go off, and if you go up or down from wherever he's at, you know, like he could be at the top level, you can go down one level or whatever, it's not supposed to hit you, but sometimes it does. And it could just be a pixel up or down, you know, or whatever, and like, you know, you take that a little extra amount of damage, and I'm already at a disadvantage in this fight anyways, so it's like any little amount of damage I took leading up to it, it's like, well, that's a restart, you know, like because I can't dodge Eve's attack on this ability in this time, you know, and eventually I'm gonna get back to that cycle. So again, like it sucks to be in a point where you know that you have a 20-minute fight ahead of you, and any little mistake leading up to the end of that fight, you just know that it's over, and it's like, well, I can prolong the inevitable, or I can just hit restart right now, you know, and like.
Yeah, exactly. Well, because on that battle, I just ran up to the top part and I just stood there and I never left that. I just hung out there. And I would cast my defense one, cast my attack magic, and then I would just sit there and just blast away at him. You know, that was my. I went with that, like find a nice place to stand and call it a day. But I will say that that's actually one of the things in this game is the status effects. Actually, they actually make a big difference. Like, and I almost kind of give them credit for making them like kind of a pain in the ass in this game. Because like if you get literally the paralyzed one, like this, I've never seen a game where it's almost like way worse than like this one. Like because Evil did the thing where like she'll shoot like one round, but then she bends over and just like has to like catch her breath or whatnot, and it's just like it really screws you over. Like it makes you go like, no, cast that antibody, like fix this right away. You know, same with the blind. The blind's the other one too, where it's just like, cast that instantly. Such a
pain in the dick, dude. So I was asking you too, like towards the end, because those long monkey, you know, like gas mask looking dudes or whatever, you know, that appear at the end of the game. So the other thing that they do is they turn invisible, and if you turn your back to them, they grab you by the back of your throat and they start choking you out or whatever. I've seen that ability do 20 damage. I've seen that ability do 90 damage, and it's like, it's impossible, you know. And like yet again, that added to some frustrations where it's like, okay, I go and I grind my BP and I'm ready to head back to my save point so I can save, so I can go buy shit, so I can get through this final fight, you know. And I'm running back through that room, not realizing that there was an invisible enemy in there or whatever. I have 110 health, and he grabs me and he just goes choke, you know, real quick. I smash my buttons real fast. I get out of the animation. I'm like, cool. I still have 90 health. Leading up to this point, the most amount of damage these things have ever done to me was like 50 damage. So I'm like, cool, I'm clear. I'm fine. Yeah. I move 2 steps forward. He grabs me again. He does fucking 90 damage, dude, and kills me. And like, oh, it's just like, yeah. Admittedly, I've been very frustrated the last few days.
Yeah. That thing, because whenever those enemies would come, what I would end up doing is I would just cast those orb balls because I had that by about that point. So I just toss that thing up. If I saw an invisible enemy, it's like screw this, throw these things out, and then it would just spin around and he would run into it and kill him.
Yeah.
You know, because for my magic, I never focused on any of the offense stuff. I only got the healing first. I had one of the antibodies. I maxed that one out way later on.
Yeah.
And then I got the defense and the attack one. I focused on those ones, and once I got that, then I eventually got the orb ball thing. And because and by this point, I started having so much XP that I was like, okay, so I maxed out all the Earth stuff. Then I maxed out at least the antibodies. I don't think I got the life drain one because it looked like it took a lot of MP, and I was like, well, that seems kind of like a waste. Yeah. So then I just put a bunch of my extra XP. I think I just put into the fireball one just for because I had it, and then I never used the electric stuff. It looked like it was good, but it just felt like I only have so much XP. I don't think I'm going to touch this.
Yeah, I never did either. The one like offensive ability that I put in quite a bit was the combustion. Combustion's great for crowd control, you know, just because it throws that circular effect on the ground or whatever area of effect. And you shoot like crazy amount of damage of fire, you know, especially level 3 with that thing. That definitely helped me with some combat later on, especially the enemies that are like the little blob monsters that don't take physical damage or whatever. You have to do elemental damage to hurt them. Yeah, so again, I mean, like, you know, from PE1 to PE2, like that is one thing that the game totally grasped onto that I feel is very, very good is it's the ability system. I think it's really good. I enjoyed all the abilities that I really used. Some are more useful than others, of course, you know, some are very situational, but I think in general, they're really well done, you know, so.
Yeah, no, those are cool. Well, it's like even that you mentioned those little blob creatures too. Like those are the ones that like I was using the baton on those for a while, and then I realized I'm like, oh, once I got that shock stun gun thing, that thing would kill him in one hit.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That stun gun was actually, I don't know if you picked that thing up for the machine gun, but that thing was really good.
Yeah, and there's so that is one other comment that I'll make just because I spent so much time here. So in some of those areas, especially the labs or whatever, where you're running into those enemy types or whatever, some of their models are so tiny that you just can't see them. And sometimes like, and again, like this is kind of it's a mismatch of like static cameras and really condensed, you know, areas and whatnot. There was multiple times where I would like clear a room. There's another enemy still in that room. So like the ending screen wouldn't like load or whatever, you know, but I couldn't find it. And like I'm sitting there like jamming on square, you know, like trying to target wherever it is, and like Aya just won't target it or whatever, and it would like be behind like a desk and just like stuck, you know, like in a particular angle that I just couldn't see. And again, like, you know, like I think that if during there's so many different ways I can go about this, but like if they brought back the PE1 idea of like when you're in combat, you kind of have this zoomed out overhead style view or whatever, could have fixed a lot of that stuff for me anyways, you know. So
no, I know, because a lot of times you would have to go search for some of those enemies in there and so on. At least there was always a confirmation that, like, you know, Aya would always reload her gun, knowing that you killed everything. Then, of course, the screen comes up, you know. Same with, I will say, one of the nice features is the fact that, like, by pulling your gun up when you enter a room, you can know yay or nay if there is any enemies in there. I think that's kind of a neat thing, too. I mean, granted, if you look at your map, you know, too. But I think that there is some kind of things that kind of at least give you an indication. But, yeah, some of those invisible little ones and so on like that, you know, you have to go search and hunt for and whatnot just to figure out where the heck they hit at.
Yeah, it's really annoying. But you know, I think like just in general, I think PE2 is a solid, very, very fun experience. Again, I think if you like the first game, if you like something a little more experimental, you know, like this is totally it, you know, like this is like one of those, like you're saying, like I don't think it's even like a top 10 for me, but I think that Parasite Eve in general is like within my top 20, I would say, of like this era, you know. PE2 probably a little bit lesser, and it's really funny to me because like my only context walking into PE1 was PE2 at the time, and I was just like at the start of PE1 I was like like it's cool, but like it's not PE2, you know. And now it's just like my thoughts have completely polar reversed, you know. It's just like, no, I wish this game was way more like the first game, you know. So So
Well, it's probably also because PE2 definitely had the whole look and aesthetic of it is just, it makes you want to play it. Like, it looks
hmm
so cool and it looks so futuristic. Even like nowadays, it's like that game's, 25 years old, but like I still feel like those graphics look phenomenal in it. You know what I mean? Like, that was one of the things I was just blown away with the whole time I was playing it, is just like how good that game looked. And once
hmm
again, I kept thinking, I'm like, I don't think I can think of a game on PlayStation 1 that looks better than this. Not even the Final Fantasy games. And now the Final Fantasy games, you might think they look better, but because the game's 4 discs
hmm
long and there's so many other things you see along the way,
hmm
but just compacting it down to like kind of the core stuff, I'm like, no, dude, I think Parasite Eve 2 is just
yeah,
the top notch, almost on there. And yeah, just like everything about it, I just thought was still pretty darn sweet and pretty cool. Even if there is just a couple of those, there's just a handful of goofy things that just hold it back, in my opinion, from being like, one of those like high bar, just like Parasite Eve 1, just like Resident Evil 3 or anything else right around that same time period. It's just off by just a fraction, but it's not saying it doesn't make it still really good, but just it's just that little bit. It kind of reminds me like almost the way that Dino Crisis 1 is, where I really like Dino Crisis 1, but it has a handful of those things in there that makes it, whenever I play that game, I always kind of go, well, I'm not going to play this for a moment, because it's just got some of those goofy turnaround puzzles and
yeah,
some of those like double card key type stuff that you always kind of go, oh yeah, that. Now I almost feel Parasite's a little bit more straightforward than Dino Crisis 1 is, but
yeah, yep.
it's in that kind of same thing. As I said, that slider puzzles was the main thing that I felt like, but no, there's still a lot to be had. It is kind of a bummer that this is one of those series that sounds like we might not see at all anytime soon again.
Yeah.
If that's the case. But yeah, it's still, I think it's well worth it. And I still think that like really it's like probably one of the top 10 coolest experiences you can have on PS1. I think it fits up there with just like Metal Gear Solid and Final Fantasy and Resident Evil, and all that stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
Silent Hill 1, all that.
hmm
But yeah, Parasite Eve 2, you pretty much got to kind of go get it on emulation, unless you happen to have it on your PS3 store still. But
Yeah. hmm
that was the only previous way to get it beforehand, was that or PSP. But
Yeah.
hopefully one of these days they'll be able to put out a cool little collection. As I said, it seems like they're pulling out other Squaresoft things, so I don't think it's super out of the question, even though it sounds like that original guy doesn't really want to have anything to do with it, but
Yeah.
maybe some money will help talk.
Well, again, I think a spiritual successor would be totally warranted here, and it doesn't even have to be Square. Like just anybody, anybody that has played through these games and at least understands the core concept of the marriage of survival horror to RPG. I think could be very, very well done in today's realm. So.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of possibilities there, but yeah, I'm glad we played through Parasite Eve 2. It's one of those ones that sat there on my back burner forever, and I knew that one day I finally would, and I'm glad I did, because I think it is a high bar game. But yeah, till then though, you can always go check out more Silent Evil podcasts along with Old Man Orange as well too on YouTube and Spotify. Till then, I'm Spencer Scott Holmes,
And I am Cameron.
and we'll see you some other time.